Hi everyone, welcome to my channel where I talk about various topics of interest. And if you've not subscribed already to my channel, please subscribe, share, and follow so you don't miss any of my future videos. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about why the gospel must be preached to all. And my presentation will have the following outline. First, I'm going to talk about the reality of hell, as in context, of the gospel. Then I'll talk about the knowledge of the gospel. Then I'll summarize the presentation. Then I'll end the presentation with a prayer. So let's get started. Hell is a real place, it's a spiritual place that people actually go to after their death, So once their lives on earth, comes to an end, it is one of the permanent destinations available for people to go to. And these are typically people who have nothing to do with God, people who have no salvation, who didn't take God seriously when they were alive and all those kinds of things. So these people are kind of on their own, because they are not covered by the power and the protection of God. So these people are the ones, who actually end up in hell, basically. And in hell, what happens is that these people who end up in hell go through suffering, and they are tormented by the forces of darkness which are in hell, and this torment goes on forever and ever. And for most situations, these people they have no hope, of ever getting away from hell, because it is a permanent destination. There are two main destinations. Either you get to be with God or you get to be separated away from God. So if you don't make it into the presence of God, then definitely you make it to hell, and you are stuck there forever, going through suffering, that these forces of darkness are going to exact on you, So basically that's what it is. And every human being, in this particular world deserves to know the reality of hell and the forces of darkness who run this place. The forces of darkness, who run hell actually have hatred towards God, and because they cannot go to where God is to attack God, they actually redirect their hatred towards mankind, people who make it into hell, because you were made in the image of God. So there's some kind of characteristic or element of God in you as you're alive in here, and because of that, they hate you, basically. So once you make it into hell and you don't make it into the presence of God, then it is a whole feast, of torment for them. They will do whatever it is that they want with you, and you, the person who has ended up over there, at that time your strength would have finished. There's nothing you can do about it. So basically you are subject to their will, and what they want to do with you over there. And hell is not a good place for anyone. No one, should actually wish to ever make it into hell, because the place is a horrible place. It's complete separation from God and from anything good, in this particular reality. And this reality is the reason why the gospel is preached, so people will get to know about this. It is the reason why Jesus Christ came down, and actually commanded his followers, that go, don't keep the gospel to yourself. Go out and preach the gospel to others. Preach to as much people as possible. Those who accept it and accept the gift of salvation can make it back into the presence of God. But for those who do not, at least your job would have been done. And it is for the gospel, and the message of hell, the reason why Jesus Christ came down, to sacrifice his life and blood, so people can actually tap into the power of the gospel and be protected from going into hell, by the power of God, basically. The gospel is preached because of the existence of hell, because the gospel is the only knowledge base that has the power and the knowledge that mankind actually requires, to stray away from hell and make it back into the presence of God. So it's a very serious matter. The gospel generally provides us with knowledge of salvation, heaven and hell. And typically the gospel is made up of the first 4 books of the New Testament. These things are actually described, in detail, in some instances, in this particular gospel. And heaven and hell are the 2 final destinations for the souls of all mankind, after they die on this particular earth. And these destinations are permanent destinations. Once you arrive in these destinations, you cannot turn around, you cannot make it back, basically. And these are places where you no longer, as a human being, have free will, because your free will is only available in this world as you live in this physical realm. But once your time comes up, to transition away from this physical realm into the eternal realm after your death, your free will would have come to an end, basically. And you are subject to the forces of these destinations. And these are just two destinations. You either get to make it into heaven, or you make it into hell. Those who actually walk with God in this particular life are the ones who make it into heaven, because heaven is a dwelling place of God. Those who had nothing to do with God will be separated away from God, and they will actually make it into hell. And either way, it's a permanent destination. And every human being in this particular world deserves to know this, and this is why the gospel is shared all over the world. Everybody has the freedom to choose, but basically the choices you make actually has repercussions. Their effects, and then their consequences that would be experienced eventually after death, basically. So if you chose to walk with God in this particular life, you can make it back into the presence of God. If you chose to stray away from God in this particular life and do things according to your desire, then you will be separated away from God, in the aftermath. You make it into hell, and then you'll be stuck over there for eternity. And this is the reason why the gospel is actually preached. And this is the reason why every human being in this particular world needs the gospel, whether they know it or not. Everyone needs the gospel because it has knowledge of salvation, knowledge of what will help you escape the tortures of hell, basically. So, because we have freedom, basically, it's understandable that not everyone will accept what is actually in the gospel. But at least the fact that the gospel is out there, for anyone who is interested to grab it, is actually something which is actually good. So we all need the gospel, because it helps us to walk with God in this particular life and to also make it back into the presence of God after our lives in this particular world. And those who end up in hell have no hope for salvation. Their souls would have been destroyed at that particular point, because at that particular point there's no turning back, and there's no good in this particular place. It is a place of the absence of good. Once you go into that particular place, everything horrible you can ever imagine in this particular world is eternal, multiplied by infinity, actually. That is what you're going to experience in this particular place. And there's no hope. There's no getting out. There's no redemption. There's no rescue. In fact, you are condemned forever, basically, in this particular place. So it is not a place that anyone should ever wish to go. And all the tools, the knowledge we need to avoid this particular place is available as salvation in the gospel. And the devil actually understands the power that the gospel actually carries, and this is why the devil, together with all his instruments, the various angels that follow him, actually make long-term efforts to discredit the information of the gospel. Because once the information of the gospel is discredited, people will take it, on the surface, and think that there's nothing in there actually. And this ignorance, is what the devil actually thrives on. Because if you're ignorant, then you don't have the knowledge, of what is actually in the gospel, then effectively the devil has power over you, and the devil actually has full power over you at the point of your death, because you chose to stray away from the Spirit of God. And once you stray away from the Spirit of God, you yourself as a human being, you have no power, to wrestle the forces of darkness. They actually have more power over you. The only thing that can wrestle them is the power of God. So once you stray away from the power of God, you are just available for grabs, for them, and there's nothing you personally can do about it. So I'd like to summarize this presentation that I've made. So in summary, the fact that hell exists, to actually swallow and consume all those who don't know God is the main reason why the gospel is preached everywhere in this world. That is the key. That is the main reason why the gospel is preached. It's about giving people the knowledge they need to actually escape or avoid the path to hell. And hell is not a fiction. It's not an imagination. It's a real place. It's a real spiritual place that the souls of people end up after they die. People who do not have salvation, people who have nothing to do with God in this particular life, these people actually end up in hell after their death. And the gospel has all the information, all the knowledge available to help anyone escape the grips of hell. And salvation, which is God's method of actually redeeming the soul of mankind, is actually laid out in detail in the gospel. So if you don't study the gospel, you won't get to know what is inside, basically. And what is inside is knowledge of light, of the Spirit of God, to equip you with what you need to stray away from the path of hell, so you can make it back into the presence of God in the aftermath. And every human being deserves to know the truth about salvation, about heaven, about hell, about the aftermath of death, because this is real, and this happens day in and day out to everyone who crosses over from this realm into the eternal realm. These things are real. The two permanent destinations, heaven and hell, they are real. You either get to make it into one of them, and you are stuck there for eternity. And it is for this reason why Jesus Christ came down in his glory to sacrifice his life, to humble himself, to sacrifice blood on the cross. This was done to actually pave the way to salvation. So the sacrifice pays the price, for salvation, so that anyone who is interested in this particular salvation can tap into this particular sacrifice and be covered by the power of God, so that once their time comes and they depart from this particular world, God in his own wisdom can come for them, and they can reunite, back in the presence of God. But people who don't tap into this particular sacrifice, or who have nothing to do with God in this particular realm, will be on their own, and the forces of hell would actually grab them, and they will also be stuck there for eternity, going through suffering, judgment, and pain, basically. So at this point, I would like you to pray this prayer with me. Dear God, I come before you today. I thank you for your gift of salvation offered to mankind. Please help me understand your gospel. Have mercy on me and save me from the forces of hell. I thank you for listening to my prayer. Amen. And brothers and sisters, if you prayed this prayer wholeheartedly, I do believe that the one true God who created heaven and earth and made everything possible, including you and I, will manifest things to you in ways you could never imagine. Stay blessed. And these are some of the references that I actually use for my presentation. You can check them out at your own leisure. At this point, I'd like to thank you for making the time to watch my presentation. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.